Get ready to clear out your browsing history because today we're talking about romantic subplots. You don't want to miss this. What's up, guys? My name is Brandon McNulty. I'm a writer and welcome to my writing channel. As I mentioned in the intro, today we're going to be talking about romantic subplots, and this is a big subject because romantic subplots are just about everywhere, whether it's books or movies or video games. Anywhere there's a story, there seems to be a romantic subplot. So I'm going to cover it today. I'm going to start by giving some of the main reasons why we use romantic subplots. Then I'm going to give out 3 different types of romantic subplots that you can use. And finally, I'm going to wrap things up by telling you one of the key, most important things to remember whenever you do incorporate a romantic subplot into your work. So let's start first of all with the reasons why you might use a romantic subplot. I think one of the best reasons out there is that these types of subplots, they can add a change of pace to your story. They can add a new layer of depth to it as well. I think when it comes to romantic subplots, oftentimes they work as a great palate cleanser, especially if you're writing the type of story that's high intensity, and if you're just, delivering intensity like in a thriller or horror or some other dark type of story, like maybe a darker mystery. If you just keep delivering that intensity over and over and over, your audience is going to get fatigued. And for that reason, it's a good thing to shift things over to a romantic subplot now and then. It balances out your story and just makes it easier to get through. Now, another great reason you might incorporate romantic subplots is because they humanize characters who are otherwise not emotional, or they're brooding, or they just don't express themselves well enough. Sometimes you have a main character who's, very stoic, very, they keep to themselves. And one of the ways to draw out their character and show a different side of them is by getting them involved with a character they care about. And then one final reason why I think romantic subplots work really well is because they can help you express your story's theme. And this is something that, first of all, you need to find out what your story's theme is. And let's just say, for example, we had a story about overcoming fears, and we have a main character who's just a cowardly guy, and over the course of the story, he needs to develop toward becoming courageous. Now, let's say that's our guy. We got our cowardly guy, and then in the romantic subplot, maybe he meets up with a girl who's also cowardly. And as they grow together, they start supporting one another. They start growing toward becoming more courageous. And oftentimes, these romantic subplots will help your characters grow toward who they become at the end of the story. So keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned earlier that I was going to talk about 3 specific types of romantic subplots, and I have 3 simple ones. I really boiled them down to the easiest possible ones I could think of. And the first one would be the feel-good subplot, then we have the feel-bad subplot, and finally we have the bittersweet subplot. So these are the 3 that I think work best. I think they're the most common ones out there as far as romantic subplots go. Starting with that first one, the feel-good subplot, this is the one. If you've ever watched a rom-com or a Hallmark movie, this is the type of subplot that you are totally familiar with. We've seen it a million times. It's the one where, 2 strangers meet, they grow together over the course of the story, they have a few hitches along the way, but at the end they are securely happy in their relationship, and it's obviously going to end with a happy ending. And there's just no other way around it. A lot of people love this subplot because they like to leave a movie theater or close a book and feel happy about what happened between the characters. Now, this feel-good subplot is, of course, not limited to rom-coms and Hallmark movies. You could use it in more serious dramas as well. For instance, in the movie Rocky, you have a story about a boxer going up against the heavyweight champion of the world, but that movie relies heavily on its romantic subplot. And if you've never seen the movie, basically Rocky, who's the main character, he has a girlfriend named Adrian. Over the course of the story, they grow closer and closer together. Now, in the movie Rocky 1, one of the central themes is self-respect, valuing yourself. And at the very beginning of that movie, Rocky and Adrian don't have a whole ton of self-respect. They're labeled as losers. They believe themselves to be losers. They convey this image of just being a loser. But over the course of the story, as they grow, they start dating, they start to, support one another. They grow toward becoming 2 self-respecting human beings. They support one another, and I think one of the best scenes in that movie is when Adrian yells at her brother Paulie. She says, "Paulie, I am not a loser. You're the loser." She just goes off on him, and that's a sign of her, hitting that arc, getting to the point where she has respect for herself. And of course, later on in the movie, when Rocky goes up against the heavyweight champion of the world, he needs her support in order to last the 15 rounds. Now, another great movie that uses the feel-good arc is the movie Groundhog Day. And this is, of course, the Bill Murray film where he plays a weatherman who is repeating the same day over and over and over again, and he cannot escape this time loop. And at the very beginning of this movie, Bill Murray's character is very self-absorbed, very egocentric, and it isn't until he starts getting involved with one of his coworkers, her name is Rita, they start developing a love story over the course of the second half of the movie, and he starts taking her seriously, and as that romantic subplot develops, he starts caring about other people, and that ends up helping him in at the end. That ends up breaking the spell, the constant loop of day after day after day, and it's not until he learns that lesson from his romantic subplot that he's able to solve the problem of the main plot. So now that you have an understanding of the feel-good subplot, let's shift gears over to the more miserable one, the feel-bad subplot. And this is one that can be very effective because it can have a lot of impact. And the thing about the feel-bad subplot, it usually involves a betrayal. Almost always it's going to involve a betrayal. So this is the type of romantic subplot that you'll see in spy thrillers, you'll see it in film noir, you'll see it in mysteries, you'll see it in dark thrillers. Basically any kind of dark story has the potential for a feel-bad subplot. I think Game of Thrones has a bunch of them, but when it comes to these particular subplots, usually they work because they hit us where it hurts. You know, we get invested in two characters who they get together early on in the story, things are moving along great, we admire their passion for one another, but over the course of the story, you know, things are going a little too good until toward the end, just when we think they're going to be happy together, we're going to get that happy ending, all of a sudden there comes the betrayal and everything falls apart, and it can be so frustrating for the audience, but at the same time it hits them right in the gut, right where it hurts the most. So if you're going for impact, if you want a story that's just gonna, you know, knock your audience on their ass, this is the type of romantic subplot you want to shoot for. And I think some great examples of this include movies like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, or books like James Patterson's Along Came a Spider, the TV series 24. Again, anytime you have spy thrillers, anytime you have people trading information, there's oftentimes going to be a betrayal. So those are the types of stories where it works best, but you can work it into just about any storyline where it doesn't have to have a happy ending. So keep it in mind. And then the third and final type of romantic subplot is that bittersweet subplot. And this is a subplot where it could appear to be going either good or bad, but at the end of the story there has to be some kind of complication. I think bittersweet subplots have gained in popularity over recent years because simply because life itself is kind of messy these days. We have a lot of divorce, we have mixed families, we have complications when it comes to romance, and because of that, fiction will reflect the outside world. And when it comes to writing a bittersweet subplot, I think it's important to keep in mind that your characters are flawed, they are human, they make mistakes, they have things like jealousy, and you know, they let their emotions take over themselves, and things don't always end up perfect, or they don't always turn entirely to shit. So think about this when you're coming up with your romantic subplot, and I think there are plenty of great examples out there of stories where you have these bittersweet subplots. For instance, I think one of the most famous ones would be Titanic, and that's one where it looks like we're headed toward a happy ending, we're headed toward that feel-good subplot, but at the end, death gets in the way. Death is the complication. Another great example would be Empire Strikes Back, where you have Leia, Han, I love you, I know, and Darth Vader says, not gonna happen, and then they get split up until the next movie. And it's, notice at the end of Empire Strikes Back, it's neither positive nor negative, it's just one of those complicated situations. It's bittersweet. We have to wait until the next movie in the trilogy to see how it gets resolved. So if you are looking to add more depth to your story, consider adding a bittersweet subplot and adding in a complication at the end, whether it involved death like in Titanic, or maybe an antagonist is causing problems like Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back, or you can have something like health issues, personal obligations, society's rules. There are so many different possibilities, so many different complications out there. You just have to find the one that works best for your story and incorporate it into your romantic subplot. So before I wrap up this video, I want to talk about one last important thing regarding romantic subplots, and this is the most important thing when it comes to writing them. And basically, what you have to remember is that when you write a romantic subplot, that subplot has to affect the main plot. There has to be impact. Remember earlier on when I talked about Groundhog Day, I talked about how the romantic subplot in that movie enabled Bill Murray's character to overcome his character flaw and solve the problem of the main plot. That is great. That brings that story to a whole new level. And when you have that romantic subplot interweaving with the main plot and the two of them work together to create a greater overall story, that's how you know you've done a great job with the subplot. So don't forget that. Make sure your romantic subplot ties into the main plot. You absolutely must do that in order for your story to work. So I hope this helps. Question of the day: what type of romantic subplot are you incorporating in your current work in progress? Let me know in the comments section below. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Hit the like and subscribe buttons for me. Share this video with a friend. Don't forget to clear out your browsing history. And as always, remember to keep on writing.